Hello everyone, I'm Jen and I make useful English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary ideas and more to help you become a literary expert. So if that sounds like what you need, then make sure you hit the subscribe button below. So in today's video, we are close reading the opening to Virginia Woolf's novel Mrs Dalloway, or a novella to be exact, because it's a rather short book. So Mrs Dalloway is one of the most iconic modernist works of all time. As mentioned, it's not very long, but there are no chapters, and the entire narrative kind of just meanders from moment to moment. And the technical term for this kind of writing is stream of consciousness. So as you can infer from the metaphorical description, stream of consciousness, like a stream, the narrative is one long flow, and the content is a representation of one's thoughts and emotions as they naturally occur, hence the word consciousness. So if you've read this novel, or at least are somewhat acquainted with early 20th century modernist literature, you know that stream of consciousness was an experimental approach to novel writing at the time, as authors like Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, William Faulkner, or the French writer Marcel Proust all tried to break away from the established convention of third-person point of view realist writing. So from a literary history standpoint then, realism as the dominant literary approach throughout the 19th century sought to describe the world and society at large in as truthful a way as possible. But modernism, as a new literary agenda which arose in early 20th century, challenged this external-oriented lens and sought to represent the individual's inner world in as truthful a way as possible. So there was a marked shift from the external to the internal world. Part of the shift in orientation had to do with World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, and it was a catastrophic event that destabilized and disillusioned many people's worldview. So what had previously seemed like a prim, proper, and civilized existence now turned into chaos, violence, and debris as of overnight. So with the New World Order then came a new way of experiencing and looking at the world, which occasioned the need for a new approach to literary writing and representation. So for a detailed overview of the context of modernist literature, you can check out my explainer right here. So there's a lot more to be said about the historical and biographical context of Mrs Dalloway, which you can check out in the articles I'll link to in the description box. But since the focus of this video is the close reading analysis, let's dive straight into the opening moments by looking more closely at the language, structure, and form of Woolf's writing. Sit tight. Now, the opening line of the novel, Mrs Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, is at once cryptic and alluring, as a statement that's almost entirely out of the blue. So the plot begins in media res, in the middle of the action, as we gradually discover that Clarissa Dalloway, who is the Mrs Dalloway in the title of the novel, is preparing to host a dinner party at her home that evening, and the flowers are for the party. It's also slightly misleading for the reader, who might assume from the third-person reference to Mrs Dalloway that this is a conventional sort of narrative, only to then be hit with a flux of first-person interior monologue as Clarissa's thoughts come pouring through the page with her impromptu musings about the morning air, the energy of London's thoroughfare, and all interspersed with flashback recollections about this ex-lover called Peter Walsh, who will appear as a character throughout the story. As Clarissa registers the vitality and energy of her surroundings, the invigorating vibe almost seems to spill over into the syntactical rhythms of the passage, as these short exclamatory statements reflecting her girlish excitement like "what a lark, what a plunge," and "how fresh, how calm," are all interwoven with calmer, delicate observations about the environs. If we consider Clarissa's social role and identity as this upper-class English woman for whom prim propriety and cool suaveness are probably by now her ingrained traits, we'll notice that the excitement and spontaneity of this passage somewhat contradicts with that demeanor expected of a person like her. But in fact, what this does is reflect this facet of Clarissa's true self, which she has most likely repressed to maintain the outward appearance of being this elegant, cool Mrs Dalloway of the English aristocratic class. Now, the simile of the early morning air being like the flap of a wave, the kiss of wave, introduces the wave motif, which is structurally mirrored in the flowing rhythms of the sentences. But as we continue reading into this paragraph, we gain a retrospective insight into the metaphor of kiss being perhaps an indication of Clarissa's mind wandering to something more romantic, which is later verified with the allusion to her ex-lover, Peter Walsh, and that particular past incident of the two of them engaging in flirtatious banter when Peter had teased Clarissa for spacing out in the garden and she giving him this cheeky retort of preferring men to cauliflowers as an implicit invite to him for approaching her. So by the way, quick technique check-in here. Notice what I did there with my analysis. I picked up one granular reference, i.e. the word kiss, and I connected it with what's going on later in this paragraph to surface a hidden association between language and content, in turn showing the porous, blurry lines between narrative and characterization in this form of hyper-associative stream of consciousness writing. That Clarissa's memory of Peter is activated by such a brief, mundane sensation as a light air breeze also tells us something about her feelings for him. Despite having been married to another man, Richard Dalloway, for many years by this point, it's likely that she still feels some degree of affection for Peter, which we later on find out in the novel to be true. By the way, guys, if you find this video helpful so far, I'd massively appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my top grade lit study content going forward. I'd also encourage you to check out my membership program by clicking the join button below if you want exclusive access to members only study content and make special video requests. I'll see you there. And like many ex-lovers, Clarissa can't help but throw in a couple of bitter digs that show Peter in an unflattering light. For example, as someone who was grumpy and wrote awfully dull letters, perhaps out of both spite and sadness that they didn't work out at the end. And so subconsciously, Clarissa's trying to recall parts of him that would make her feel less sad about the poignant what if of their failed relationship. And if you've ever broken up with someone before and find yourself thinking back on your ex, well, I'd imagine that you can resonate with this sort of instinct, right? Which may be unfair to the ex-lover, but is of course all too human. As the narrative shifts gradually away from Clarissa's sensations and memories, the point of view is ascribed temporarily to Clarissa's neighbour, Scrope Purvis, who's this man voyeuristically observing Clarissa as she crosses the street, unbeknownst to her, of course. Scrope Purvis's perception of Clarissa as a vivacious character with a touch of the bird of the jay validates that inner girlishness and excitability we've seen earlier with Clarissa's mental registration of that lark's plunge and that fresh, calm air. The use of the verb perched when Purvis thought, there she perched, also gives an ornithological touch to the characterization. Ornithologic meaning relating to birds, as birds are of course known to perch on branches. From a feminist critical angle, one could argue that this is a moment which kind of shows men's objectifying tendencies towards women, because here Scrope Purvis is kind of leering at and reducing Clarissa into this animal, a bird, which is often kind of used as a derogatory metonym for women. Whether or not that's a stretch of an interpretation, you can be the judge of, but in any case, Woolf's works are often read in a feministic light anyway. I'm personally not a huge fan of applying a feminist approach to reading anything, especially not a reductive one, but that was just to show you a possible route of interpretation that you could take even within the context of close reading. So anyway, as the narrative vantage switches out of Scrope Purvis's purview and moves back to Clarissa's consciousness, we gain a deeper sense of her emotional complexity as someone who feels many more layers between just excitement and joy about her immediate surroundings, but also a clashing mix of nostalgia, poignancy, confusion, euphoria, and even fear as the sounds, sights, and stimulations activate both her reflective and existential thinking. The hurried throbbing of morning traffic reminds her of her own heart condition, the particular hush and indescribable pause that's implied to be the stopping of vehicles on the road, bringing up the association of her influenza-affected heart, suggesting a certain degree of unspoken anxiety she feels about her health as a middle-aged woman. But Clarissa is energized once again by the booming of Big Ben's bell as it strikes on the hour with a sense of alarm and inevitability, striking into every hearer's heart the fact that the hour that has passed can never be recovered. It is the hour irrevocable, as it leaves forever with the passing of time. This awareness of life's temporality manifests as a sudden existential insight for Clarissa, as she considers how a sheer love of life makes one foolish, but is also perhaps the only, if not maybe the best way to live. The objective, irrevocable passing of time is something of a carpe diem reminder for Clarissa. Despite each hour leaving us, we have the agency to create every moment afresh by engaging fully and immersing deeply within the fabric of our environs, like the way she's presented to be doing so in this moment. As Clarissa takes in every bit of sensorial minutiae, savouring and celebrating it in her consciousness, she demonstrates precisely what it means to be part of the species of people that loves life deeply. And as the passage concludes with a long enumerated catalogue of all the observations Clarissa makes of this random London morning, we can infer from this hungry absorption of external details that far from being the subdued, prim and proper aristocratic wife and homemaker, Clarissa contains a wealth of energy that is pent up within and seeks lyrical expression. Clarissa's consciousness, we see, is an expansive one, as she takes in all of the kinesthetic details, the swing, tramp and trudge, shuffling and swinging of sandwich men, the visual, the carriages, motor cars, omnibuses, fans, and the auditory, the bellow and the uproar of brass bands, barrel organs, jingle and strange high singing of some aeroplane overhead in the urban orbit, which she sees herself as being an inextricably connected piece of. So this incremental build-up of causal length in this final section reinforces the emotional intensity, that deep, visceral love that Clarissa feels, and sets up a positive, almost celebratory tone for the start of the novel. In the broader structural logic of this novel, what this opening passage signals is that Clarissa Dalloway represents life with her zest and love for the sheer experience of living, which serves as the foil to Septimus Smith, who we'll eventually find out as the other character, who is this war veteran who represents death with its despair and hopelessness about the state of the world, which is tragic and beyond repair from his post-war vantage. And there you go, everyone. That's my close reading analysis of the opening passage to Virginia Woolf's Mrs Dalloway, which is probably one of the most iconic pieces of modernist writing ever. I personally really love this novel, and I hope that my close reading analysis of it has inspired you to think about Woolf's writing in new creative ways. Comment below and share your thoughts with me and others about what you think of this moment, and we can get a discussion going. So for your next video, I recommend that you watch my video on the context of modernist literature, which is going to give you a broader understanding of the historical and cultural influences which would have informed Woolf's writing. As always, hit that thumbs up button below if you found this video helpful in any way, so that YouTube can spread it to other passionate lit learners like yourself around the world. And that, of course, you can encourage me to keep making these useful lit videos for you in the future. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and switch on that bell notification so you don't miss out on my future weekly content. You can also consider joining my membership program if you want to make exclusive video requests or enjoy essay review perks. You can click the join button below to find out more. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye!